So, Eva, what got you started on Bikram's story?
Actually, someone in the audience, Tabs Breeze, who is here, who was a development executive at Pulse Films in the UK, saw my last film in London and gave me a call and said she wanted to do something with me. And a few months later, she sent me some material, a couple of articles, and some of them I'd seen. I'd seen a Vanity Fair article about him, so I knew a little about him. And from there, I spent a lot of time reading and talking and meeting with people, and we took it to Netflix. And here we are.
So there has been, reporting as we've seen the film around this. What were the things that you were trying to get in this film that, either people or just people on camera?
I mean, I think one of the big things was we obviously wanted to have women telling their story. And I think one of the big things with this film is it's a pre-Me Too story in a post-Me Too world. And I think that changes everything. And these women were very young and they spoke out in a world that wasn't supportive at a time when people were vilifying them. And I thought that that was a new perspective to look at. And I think when we started at the very beginning, it was just before Me Too. And so as I was starting to research, Me Too kind of broke. And that made a shift for me and made it, in a way, much more interesting. And so while I was making the film, I was obviously watching what was happening. And I just thought, I think one of the most important things to really take away from this is that these girls, as I said, were young, courageous, stood up, were vilified, were threatened, lost their employment, lost their community, and were attacked and were scared, but they still did it. And then in the end, they kind of got nothing because the settlements were not big. They had to sign NDAs, but I know that they weren't big. And I think it's a really important message to have now while we await Harvey Weinstein's trial and many others, to show how easy it is for people to get away with these kind of crimes.
The footage at the very end of the clinic in Spain from this year is kind of chilling and was new to me when I saw it over the summer. You didn't have that in there yet. Can you talk about where that source is coming? Is someone filming that in the spirit of an expose, or someone filming that in the spirit of a celebration of this clinic?
Celebration. I think we got that last footage because the Spain teacher training was really late in the edit. It was actually just a couple of months ago. It was summer. It was pretty much, we stuck it in just before picture lock. And we spent, we had an amazing archive team and also assistant editor who was really handy with finding footage in dark places, but there are a lot of active Instagram, Facebook pages still, and people post things and they post them showing how fantastic it is.
And is your sense that people who are still followers of him are doing it out of ignorance or out of defiance of news that has already circulated?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a combination. There are absolute supporters of his who don't believe any of this is true. And then there are people who don't know, don't care, they love the yoga. I went to a lot of Bikram classes and at Bikram studios because there's not that many in LA, there's only about 5 left that haven't changed the name, but I went to those classes and I asked the people after the classes if they knew about it. And they kind of said, I know he did something bad. And I said, do you want to know more? Does it bother you? And they actually don't care. And clearly I'm from Australia originally. I'm sure you can hear my accent. But, there's a lot of Bikram studios in Australia and around the world, in Europe, Japan, it's really big. And a bunch of my friends still go to Bikram studios in Australia, which really I find quite shocking. And it's because it's handy, it's habit. People, I think this is important to make people realise they need to disassociate from him urgently.
Let's take some questions from the audience right here.
Mine too.
But yeah, exactly. But sadly, I would sadly, in some way, respectfully disagree with the fact that Mexico in 2018 and Spain 2019, that's still, and what the district attorney in LA did not do, and I realize this was pre-Me Too. I would just like to hear your comment that sadly, to me, this is an expose of the ongoing disrespect undervaluing of women in our society to such a profound degree. It's just heartbreaking. As children are too, in our country, we find out.
So anyone who didn't hear was a reflection that the fact that this is ongoing all the way till 2019 is a signal of continuing disrespect for women in society. Can you reflect on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a staggering statistic, which is, and this is part of the reluctance of someone like Jackie Lacey and a lot of district attorneys to go after men who commit sex crimes. I believe it's 10% of sex crimes end up being taken to court criminally, which is a pretty staggering statistic. I think there is a hesitancy with district attorneys to go after high-profile, powerful men, and I think that is a little bit of the OJ legacy. It was big, it was expensive, it was an embarrassment. These cases are hard to win, and Carla Minard, who's the amazing lawyer who represented Micki, says that. You know, she says they're hard cases to win. It's he said, she said. Women often, particularly pre-Me Too, didn't tell anyone about it because of the shame, so there's no witnesses. They often didn't go and seek medical treatment, and they certainly went to the police a lot later where they met resistance. So it definitely is a very tricky thing. And in the Harvey Weinstein case, this is super interesting, the DA in New York was not going to go after him criminally. And after Me Too and Time's Up happened, Governor Cuomo of New York pressured the DA and said, you have to reopen the case. So that's how hard it is. And one of the things that I'm talking about when doing press about the film is that we have a great new governor in California, Gavin Newsom, and he needs to see this film and he needs to put pressure on Jackie Lacey to go after Bikram. And that's a hope that we have. How realistic it is, I don't know. To extradite someone is a really complicated, long journey. You have to be tried criminally. You have to be convicted for up to or more than 2 years. And then Interpol will put you on a list. And on that list, they usually end up extraditing less than 1%. So, you know, we're all hopeful, but it's a stretch. Yeah.
Right there in the middle, this woman.
So if there are still Bikram yoga studios, does Bikram get money from that? And if that's the case, why can't Micki obtain a settlement from his income?
So if there are still Bikram studios, is he still getting royalties from those? And if that's the case, why can't some of the victims get a royalty from that?
Yeah, it's another good question. I mean, it's a sort of really complicated thing, and to explain all of this, you know, this was all stuff Kimberly Hassett's here, my amazing editor, and, you know, we talked about so many things that we couldn't put in the film. The whole franchise system never worked properly because everything he set up was fairly dodgy, I guess is the best word. So some people paid franchise fees. Barely anyone does now since the court case. The way he made money was teacher training. You know, it was up to $14,000 now for the 9-week course. 500 people twice a year. That's a lot of money. So the franchise thing was very unmonitored. It was very sporadic. It wasn't a lot of money, and that's all dissipated. So Micki still hasn't gotten anything.
Question right here.
Oh, yeah.
So, did you try to get Bikram to talk to you on camera?
Oh, yeah, and I'm expecting a phone call any second. Yeah, he's quite... Yeah, so actually he's tricky. He's a little tricky to get onto, and, you know, he has a bit of a wall around him these days of his inner circle. But Patrice, who is the woman with the red hair in the green Fernie room, she's still quite close with him, and she offered to put me in touch with him and suggested I write him an email. So I wrote a Dear Bikram email that didn't say, I'm a big fan of your work, as an opening line. And he told her that he received it. He was open to speaking with me. And then he said he needed to talk with his children who run his business with him now. And then I heard nothing. And so I talked to Patrice again, and I said, why don't I write another letter and tell him about some of the people I'm speaking to, because some of them he likes. So I wrote another letter, and that was it. But I always wanted to meet him. I've spent a year and a half of my life, you know, obsessed with him. But I don't know that we would have gotten anything more out of him. He's done so much press. I mean, he's stopped now for obvious reasons. I think his lawyers have just said never, ever speak again with a camera around. But I mean, I don't know if it would have added to the film, but boy, it would have added to me. I would have loved to have met him. Yeah.
Question here. So the question is, if you did try or why you didn't interview people who've been going to his studios and trainings more recently.
I talked to a lot of people who did recent teacher trainings, and none of them would go on camera. And I'm pretty good at convincing people to do things, but they wouldn't talk to me. They gave me a lot of information, but they wouldn't talk to me. And Patrice is someone who still goes to Bikram yoga. She was the only one. I mean, people who believe in him still feel hurt, and they feel that they've been betrayed, and they feel like we're attacking them. I approached every Bikram studio in America and some in Europe. And Patrice was the only person brave enough to speak to me. And I think she's a really reasonable, strong woman with a point of view, and I really respected that.
Question right here. If anyone didn't hear it, someone reflecting that she had attended Bikram yoga sessions here in Toronto, was not aware of this story, and wonders about the extent of reporting in other places in the globe.
It's actually been covered. There has been quite a bit of coverage, but I mean, it's like everything else. There's so much news, you blink and you miss it, and it's not something that's covered now. And I think what's interesting with this film is it will obviously, it's comprehensive. It's put it all together. It tells the whole story. And, this is our first screening, and some press came out in the last 24 hours, and I woke up this morning and my Facebook messaging and Instagram messaging was full with a very wide variety of comments, but there were already a few people who said, this happened to me. And so I think this is not an isolated situation where it's happened 4 or 5 times. This has been going on for 50 years, since the 70s. So I actually think, in a post-Me Too world, I think this might encourage a lot more people to come out. And hopefully it will also encourage just women in general, again, more to come out, because it shows the importance of it and the urgency of it.
Who's got a question? Yeah, up there. Do you have any concerns for your personal safety?
Oh boy.
So many filmmakers in my section get this question.
I mean, I've spent a lot of time in war zones, in really dangerous environments, and I've gotten into a lot of trouble. So I guess, and I don't want to say anything because this will probably be my downfall, but I feel like, I'll probably get some threats and some nasty phone calls. He has a habit of having his people call people and say things like, I know where you live and I know where your mother lives. And, he's not very kind of good at a lot of things, and I think he's pretty bad at threatening people. We have a lot of lawyers. This has been vetted beyond belief because he's incredibly litigious. But because he's an American citizen and he lives in India, he's not going to have a lot of luck suing, because he'll have to come back and take depositions, which he's clearly fantastic at doing. And then it all falls apart because he can't come back to America, because then he'll be arrested. So, I think Netflix are aware. We're all going to monitor social media. If you see any dodgy looking people around, let me know. But, it's easy to laugh until it's not, till there's a problem. So, we are aware and we're taking it seriously. But I think he's in another country and he's hiding, and I'm sure he's very angry at the minute, because there's been a lot of press in the last few days, and he would have seen it and he would be very angry, because he probably thought this was a piece about how great he was over the last 12 months, because he's such a narcissist,
Question on the aisle? So it's a question about the authorship of the sequence of yoga, whether Bikram invented it or someone else did.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really well-known story in India, but obviously it's not known here at all because nobody knows that story. And we had a journalist in India kind of do some really deep research. And the lovely yogi, Mukul, who's in the film, was one of Bikram's contemporaries, and he knew him. And he was also able to tell us that Bikram came to yoga really late and kind of did a crash course in it. He was never a big yogi. Mukul is, the yogi. He has a school in Calcutta. He lives very modestly. He does yoga therapy and heals people. And Bishnu Ghosh is really well known. And as he says, he was a giant in the film. He says that. And he had this sequence and Bikram stole it. And I think we proved it pretty clearly. It's extraordinary. He tried, I feel like it was in the 90s or maybe the early 2000s when he tried to copyright it in the courts and he failed. I mean, he's super litigious. We could do another film about the amount of time he's gone to court and sued people. And he sued people for copying his sequence. Raquel Welch wrote a book and did an exercise video that was basically the 26x2, and Bikram sued her and she did a settlement, and that's how he bought his pink house in Beverly Hills. So that's the ultimate irony.
Right here, this woman in the polka dots. So what was the most shocking thing that struck you?
Because this is my first Q&A, I'd never thought about that. And as you were asking it, I sort of panicked and thought, what was the most shocking thing? And I actually think it was when we first watched the depositions. It had taken a really long time to get the deposition tapes, and they haven't been seen before. And I sat down for about 4 really depressing days, with a notepad and my laptop and just watched him. And I just found it stunning. And I remember when I saw that line, what are the 3 things you don't like? And he says, no, it's 4 things. And he says, cold pussy. And that's under oath. That's essentially a courtroom. I mean, that's evidence. And it was just, I just couldn't believe it. I still can't believe it, And also I think the other footage is that Thailand footage where he's being served after Micki's case and he just goes off on this tirade of, it's just, to me it's that thing of, he's a guru and a yogi, and I've never met anyone who is less spiritual or less thoughtful or more narcissistic or, so to me, the shock just continues on. I still watch it now and I still I can't believe this has happened and he's got away with it.
Time for 1 or 2 more quick questions up there.
Given he's a narcissist, we know there's going to be more victims, and some of them will watch this great documentary. How do you see your role going forward when some of these women contact you, irrespective of the future?
So can you talk about how you see your role when you get contacted by these women, past victims?
Yeah, it's a really good question. This is a great audience. Thank you, guys. It's funny when I was just saying to Kate, who's here from Netflix, our Netflix exec, that, I got all these emails overnight and this hasn't even started. And actually in her previous job at the BBC, she bought my last film, which was about refugees. It was much more narrow than that, but I won't bore you with the details. And that was, 4 years ago. And I still get inundated most days with, messages from refugees around the world. So I definitely feel like there's a responsibility once you make a film. I've been doing this for 25 years, and so I have a lot of people contacting me from films for a long time, and I do very much try to honour people and try to help them. And I think if women reached out to me, the best thing I could do for them would be to show them the way to some really strong lawyers who have represented some of the other women, because there's two female lawyers that have represented most of the women in California, and they're based in California, and I would send them straight to them. I don't know how much more hope there is for getting settlements out of the women because he's gone. I don't know how far his insurance will continue to be making payouts, but I would definitely put them in that direction and maybe even connect them with some of the other women if they wanted some support.
Do we have time for one more question? Okay, can take one more question. Who's got a great one? Yeah, right there. So the question is, besides a motive to bring Bikram to justice, can you talk about other motives you had in making the film?
I think the main things are, I think it should encourage people to speak out. I think it should encourage other women to speak out. And I actually think Jacob, who's the man, the man wearing the green sweater who cries at the end, this was the first time he's ever spoken. And the night before the interview, and this is, several years after all of this has happened, and the night before the interview, he really wanted to pull out and he didn't. And I'm so grateful because I think we needed to have some male input as well into this story. And so I really think that men need to sort of step up more and support women when they come out more. And men know what's going on generally in these situations. And I think it's time for them to really step up as well. And it's happening. And I guess that's one of the legacies with this film as well. And also I think it's a real showcase of predatory behaviour. And I think maybe if people see this, maybe it will signpost somebody perhaps in their life that is acting in this way, because it's not an isolated incident. This happens all the time. So I guess they're kind of the main things.
You're the first audience to see Bikram Yogi, Guru Predator. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks especially to Eva Orner.
Thanks, guys.